Let me begin by asking you a question. And that is, are you more like Pontius Pilate or more like Yeshua? And it really comes down to one thing, and that is this. Are you someone who are seeking truth? That is, someone who wants to know the truth with the intent, with the strong desire to apply it to your life. Pontius Pilate was not, and he made one of the worst decisions a person can make. And what is that? I believe it's the worst decision, and that is to reject Yeshua. It is because Pontius Pilate thought truth wasn't important in this world that he went on to do dreadful things, condemning an innocent man to death. Now you say that's part of God's plan. That is true. But Pontius Pilate didn't have to be the one that was carrying it out. See, some things have to happen, but woe to the one who brings it about. So let me ask you again, how important is truth to you? Well, Pontius Pilate, not by choice, not by some design that he had, but he became the last statement concerning Yeshua, whether he was going to be set free or whether he was going to be put to death. Pontius Pilate, that decision ultimately was placed upon his shoulders. He could not avoid it. And there are other decisions that you and I make. We have to make them. We can't just ignore them. And my hope is that we would make those decisions not based upon our human intellect, what we think it is going to bring about for us, whether it's in our interest or not. No, that we would be wise enough to understand that the best thing that we can do for ourselves, ultimately from a kingdom perspective, is always walk in the truth. Always make decisions based upon truth. And where is the source of truth? Right here in this book. It is only in the Scriptures do we find the truth of God that can impact our life, transform our life, and make us into the being that the Yeshua died for us to be. Pontius Pilate failed miserable. So let me ask again. Who do you want to be more like? Pontius Pilate or Yeshua? Now, we left off last week with Pontius Pilate attempting to discern certain things about Yeshua. Who he was, what he had done, why are the leadership of the Jewish people turning him over? And he came to the conclusion that he is indeed a king. But he didn't take that seriously. Why? Because Yeshua said two things that caused Pontius Pilate to say, I don't want to have anything to do with this. First, Yeshua's kingdom presently is not of this world. Secondly, his kingdom is based upon truth. And Pontius Pilate made that famous statement, what is truth? Meaning, truth doesn't have any relevancy in this world. That's what he was thinking in regard to the Roman Empire. It's not truth that put him in that position of being in that tafkid, that role of leadership. No, it was a lot of deceitful things that caused him to rise up in the Roman Empire. So let's pick up where we left off last week. After Pontius Pilate said, what is truth? Look with me to John's Gospel, chapter 18, and in verse 38. After saying this again, and we're talking about Pontius Pilate, he went out to the Judeans. So he was talking to Yeshua inside the judgment hall. And then to communicate with the Judeans, that is, the high priests, the members of the Sanhedrin, the elders, he would have to go outside. We learned last week that they didn't want to come into judgment hall because they were afraid of being rendered ceremonially impure and not being able to participate of the Passover. So Pontius Pilate went out to the Judeans and he says to them, and this is his verdict, this is his decision on the matter. He says, no cause or no guiltiness have I found in him. Now that is an emphatic statement. And in the Greek language, word order can be very important to teach us what's being emphasized. He says, no guilt. And this word for no means absolutely not any. No guilt have I found in him. Now that is a true statement. Pontius Pilate may not be interested in the truth, but he found truth in that statement. That Yeshua is absolutely not guilty of anything. Now what that is to convey to us spiritually is Yeshua is without sin. Why is that important? Because in order to be that Passover sacrifice that he's going to be, and we're going to see how important Passover is, especially when we enter into the next chapter, chapter 19. We have that statement that Yeshua is without sin. There's no guiltiness in him. Verse 39, he says, you have a tradition. There's a tradition to you in order that one from among you I should release on Passover. Therefore, do you want that I should release the King of the Jews? Now, he's saying this, and he's saying this to a group of people who would have been inside the judgment hall. Now, that's important. Why do I say that? Well, look at the scripture again. Back in verse 38, he goes outside to the Jews, and he says these things. And then he speaks, saying, who do you want me to release? Do you want me to release the King of the Jews? But they cried out, all saying, not this one, but Barabbas. For Barabbas, he was a thief. Now, if we look at other Gospels, when we look at the Synoptic Gospels, what we find is this. When this statement was made, it was made to a mass of people. But in a place where the Jewish people, observant Jewish people, would not be there. Now, if we pay great attention to the other Gospels in helping us rightly understand this, we find that, as I said earlier, the group of attendants that helped the high priest were comprised of both Jewish and non-Jewish individuals. And therefore, these leaders would have sent the non-Jewish ones into this area. For when Pontius Pilate says, who do you want me to release? It was the Jewish leadership that were in fact the ones that incited the crowd to say, release Barabbas. Now, there's another important part here. The way that John tells it, he wants to put the guiltiness upon the Jewish leadership. And rightly, it should apply to them. But also we know something, and this is where we have to be very careful. Why was Yeshua crucified? Well, the answer is that he might have the sins of the world laid upon him. What caused Yeshua to be crucified? The answer is Jewish sin and Gentile sin. The sins of humanity. And how the Scripture is portraying this event, and it does so perfectly, it wants us to realize in one gospel, it's the Jewish leadership that are behind this. In another gospel, it's the people. What people? It's not clear. And the reason for that unclarity is to say humanity. So the Scripture, in a very strong way, wants to put the guiltiness of Yeshua's crucifixion upon humanity. But it heightens in the gospel the leadership of the Jewish people in bringing this about, and also the Gentile, Pontius Pilate representing the Gentiles, being complacent and not doing what he says. We just learned. He says, I have absolutely found no guiltiness of this man. But we know what's going to happen, that he's not going to act upon that right verdict that he gave. So once again, he says, you have a tradition on Passover. The leader of the Roman Empire, as a goodwill gesture, in order to observe this Passover season, the leader would release one prisoner, whoever the Jewish people would ask. Now, normally, it wouldn't be the people in general. It would be who? It would be the Sanhedrin who made the request. Pontius Pilate's not doing that. Why? Because he knows what their answer would be. So he asks a group of people, and he says, do you want me to release the King of the Jews? He thought that would be a proper way of getting the people to say, yes, release him. But they have already, and another gospel bears this out,